My mother suffered from asthma. Now, when she was not having an asthmatic attack, she was a whirlwind of activity. She was outgoing, very social, intelligent, witty, and probably could work circles around all of us kids. But when an asthmatic attack would hit, she would be completely disabled. And I can recall many times it might have been something in the air, some allergy, some stress or pressure, rough things, but also even good things. And often there was no discernible reason why the attack would come. But when it would happen, she would sit down, she'd be stooped over, trying to gasp for air. She had her little emergency inhaler that she would use, and we just had to let it work its course. And there would be that gasping and wheezing, and eventually she'd get a little bit better and sit up a little straighter. I have to tell you, as a child, that was not easy. That was hard to watch. But something good that came out of it was I came to value and treasure every single breath of oxygen. I realized how important breathing is as part of life. They tell us that the normal adult person takes 25,000 breaths a day. And by far and away, most of those breaths are taken unconsciously. But we keep on breathing. Breath is a symbol of life. In Latin, there's more than one word for breath. But one of the words is spiritum. We talk about the spirit. Another Latin word for breath is anima, the core, the inner soul, so to speak. And we realize that breathing is where something good from the outside brings life to the inside. And then that we can also, in the breathing process, expel from the inside something that's no longer needed to the outside. Breath is all representative of life. So I was more than a little happy. In fact, I was excited to realize that the primary symbol of the Feast of Pentecost from the gospel is a breath. Oh, yes, we have the story in the Acts of the Apostles. The disciples were in the upper room, and there was a strong driving wind, like we get right out here in our parking lot almost every day. And then there were the tongues of fire. But in the Gospel of John, it's so much more gentle. Jesus breathed on his disciples, and he said, receive the Holy Spirit. It's the breath of life. He was filling them with the goodness. This is the story of resurrection. We read this actual passage the week after Easter because it goes on to say that Thomas was not there. Remember the story of doubting Thomas. Okay, this is the same passage. We just read it. But it's such an incredible, powerful, wonderful reminder that Jesus, who had promised the advocate, gave it to them. Receive the Holy Spirit, the breath of God, the breath of life. We talk about the Holy Spirit a lot, 2 times a year. Confirmation and Feast of Pentecost. But it's almost like breathing. We breathe every day, and we breathe a lot, even when we're not conscious of it. The Holy Spirit is there even when we're not conscious of the Spirit's presence. And it's a Spirit that really does incredible things. And it's not just giving each of us individually the power of life, but also collectively and communally. And I think that's the real image I also get from this gospel passage, because Jesus breathes on the disciples, the early church, and they were given the gift of the Spirit. It's a gift of life that unites people, Unity is a sign of the presence of the Spirit. But it's also unity in diversity. Did you notice the first reading? People from all over the world, different languages, but they heard it as one. Or in Paul's letter, that second reading, his letter to the Corinthians, there are many gifts, but one Spirit. We are different, one from another, from another, from another. Those in church, those who have chosen not to come to church today because they're just not ready for it for whatever reason, that's okay. We need the diversity, and we want to respect differences because unity is actually stronger with diversity than if everybody is the same. But the unity means a deep regard for one another. The gift of the Spirit also gives courage to live the faith and not just talk about it or receive it. And of course, in this gospel today, Jesus breathed on them and said, "Whose sins you forgive are forgiven them." So the presence of the Spirit is also of reconciliation, mending brokenness. And the world is broken, and we need to mend it in so many ways. 50 days ago, I stood right here on Easter, talked to thousands of people, even though the church itself was empty. And literally, there were thousands of people. And 50 days ago at Easter, I used an image in the homily that somebody reminded me of just a couple of days ago. And I talked about when I was camping with a group of people, and we had this beautiful campfire, and then the heavy rain came up, and it rained like terrible all night long. It was just very strong storm. In the morning, we gathered around the campsite again where the fire had been. And while we were talking and drinking our coffee, one of the teenagers had a stick, and he was kind of just stirring up the ashes. And in the process, he came to the log that was not completely burned. And he moved the ashes away, and he said, "There's a glowing ember." And so he blew on it, the breath. He blew on it, and it came back into flame. You know, when somebody reminded me of that this week, of that homily, I thought I should have saved it for Pentecost instead of for Easter. I used it 50 days too soon. It was a sign of new life then, but it is a sign of the new life that the Holy Spirit gives us. We want the Holy Spirit to come. We need the breath of the Spirit to get those flames of faith going again. I don't think we lost our faith in the last 10 weeks. For many people, it may be stronger. I don't know. But we also know as a church, universally and even as a parish, we don't always see the flames burning right now. We have to trust that they are there. And we call on the Holy Spirit to reinvigorate us. And one of these days, those flames will be bursting out again, and the church will be full, and that will be good when the time comes. We call on the Spirit. We trust God's time, not our own time. We try to respond to the gift and live it fully. So today we say, "Come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of your faithful people everywhere. Enkindle those flames in our church, in our parish, and help us with that Spirit to renew the face of the earth."